All right, here we go. As always, in theory, anybody watching the recording afterwards, you could probably skip, I'd say only the first 2 minutes, maybe, because I do want to try to keep this short since it's already kind of late for me. That's already muted. Excellent. Dismiss that. Switch to live. That's set to live. Okay, everything is relatively synced up. Oh, no, wait, no. We're going direct to avoid Google using its automatic AI thing, not wasting 5 hours of 5 computers run energy just for the sake of Google boosting its AI usage numbers artificially. All right, now let's make sure this time. Yes, okay. Remember last time we had an issue. EpicPen refused to write over a. Okay, we're not lagging. Remember last time we had an issue. EpicPen refused to write over Google Earth. Thankfully, it looks like it's actually going to function this time, but that could always cease to be. We'll find out. All right. Hello, we got 1-4. Wow, that was fast. Usually nobody shows up when I do these later. I'm not intentionally doing them later. It's just that's how it's ending up. Because it's finally getting to the point where it's not hot. It's just enough not hot for me to go around picking up trash outside again. Since blah blah blah. Usual backstory for anybody who doesn't know. I lived in Fairbanks, Alaska. Nice, wonderful Arctic paradise. I loved it. Uh, then 2020 happens. I never got my job back. So now I had to move down to my parents' place in South Carolina, which is a whole different cultural standard of living, is the best way to put it. Man, the amount of garbage on the side of every road and every sidewalk here is fascinating. So I spent a couple hours picking up garbage. So that's why I'm starting later than I otherwise would. But anyways, we'll start off with the one thing I don't have in the title. That way people who come in later don't think they missed out on something. So, for those who didn't hear about this one, Israel branched out from just Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, and Iran during the brief stint during June and July. This time, they bombed one of their own, one of the few Middle Eastern nations that's like on relatively friendly-ish terms with them. They bombed Doha, the capital of Qatar, and so that went over really well. If there's a purpose behind it, most likely it would be to get the results that ended up resulting from it, which was that since that was where the Hamas hostage negotiations were taking place, Hamas, as a result of their leaders being bombed in a place such as Doha, of all places as well, have said that there will now never be any negotiations again, and that the war will continue forever, which is kind of what the Israeli government wanted. So I honestly have to assume that was the point behind doing that bombing on Qatar. But that is kind of that is kind of really shaken up the uh, trust level few that the few surrounding countries that aren't friends with Israel, but aren't like 120% on top of the effort to try to erase them. Now they're at the very least, Qatar is not going to be on that list of slightly neutral, slightly friendly anymore. And some of their closest buddies, like Kuwait and the UAE, are now considering leaving that list as well. So there are other consequences to that, but the primary one was likely the goal of the Israeli government, anyways, which was that now Hamas also says the war will continue forever, which is what the Israeli government wants because they just want to clear out Gaza and then annex it. And what Netanyahu himself wants personally, as we've discussed in the past, and as basically other everyone who comments on such things has said at some point, he personally, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Syria, whether it's groups in Iraq, whether it's Iran, whether it's the Houthis down in Yemen, or whether it's I don't know, provoking former not allies but not enemies into becoming enemies, and thus declaring that there's an emergency threat. He needs the the state of emergency in the country to continue indefinitely, so that he can continue the infinite time spiral. As he, if he steps out of office, despite trying to get around it by firing the prosecutors, the top prosecutors who were going to put him in prison for corruption, the ones that replaced them ended up kind of turning on him and saying that they're still just going to put him in jail for corruption. So there's no real way out of it except for continuing the state of emergency, because as long as the country is in a state of emergency, the president of Israel is untouchable. That is their government arrangement. So he needs some form of conflict to keep going, enough to justify again the continued national state of emergency, so that he can avoid corruption consequences. And the rest of the Israeli government and like the Israeli military command staff are in most likely, obviously, I don't know 100% for sure their precise motives, but they're most likely uh, going along with it because they can use it to accomplish strategic aims that they have wanted to accomplish for a while to begin with, anyways. And I mean the IDF and Mossad, if they like, if at some point they don't need him to keep doing it, they could just get rid of him if they wanted to, anyways. So that situation is just going to keep on going because they did that now. You know, that was a fascinating thing to see. The rich Persian Gulf nations, of which Qatar is one, are very, very, very pissed. So that was incredibly stabilizing decision action to take. All right, then I'll drink some water after I cover this stuff here, and then I'll look at chat again. So Russia had a YOLO moment. They launched a number of drones at basically random places in Western Poland, just over the border of Ukraine, by like a few miles, just within, you know, the range of deniability. And the ones that struck actual targets, the targets were effectively just random. Some of them targeted and exploded in random locations in fields. Some of them, some of them hit places in forests. One of them did hit a house. Another one hit, I think, like an abandoned an abandoned like car or something on the side of the road that's been rusting there for like a couple decades. So they were not trying to actually target anything specific. There are two currently proposed theories. Uh, the first is that this was a error of some kind, that they were trying to target locations in Western Ukraine around here, and the crews launching the drones were just so stupid that they input the numbers wrong, which is extremely plausible. The Russian military has done that quite a lot over the course of this whole thing, including, I don't know if you guys remember some of those videos from uh, some of the earlier streams way back at the start of the war, where some of the missile launching crews and air defense crews literally input somehow their own coordinates, and the missiles that were fired came back and blew up and destroyed them, the vehicle and the crew that launched them in the first place. That happens more than once, which is, a million percent more often than that should be a thing that should be happening. So that also, tells you that their software engineering for their systems is so poor that either no one thought to, or no one programmed in a functional counter mechanism that would not let you input your own launching coordinates as the target coordinates. But anyways, so that, stuff like that gives some weight to the idea that maybe it was just uh, some of the launch crews were so stupid that they just input coordinates that were like 15 miles further west than they were supposed to be. Since, and the fact that they, most of them hit in like literally like the middle of a forest and like just struck random trees would lend credence to that. But given how sparse the area is, and the fact that some of them did hit, like specifically hit houses, and one of them even hit like a vehicle that's, not that large of a target, uh kind of leans more in the semi-intentional direction. But then that raises a lot of questions that also just have stupidity as the answer. Like, I'm just going to draw as many giant question marks as I can. Like, what was the point? I mean, some people have suggested suggested that like the point was to test NATO's capabilities, which is kind of dumb, because I mean, if the way it's phrased is that people think they were testing what a military response would look like, but that if the aim was like to get an idea of what a military response to actually like attacking Poland would look like, you wouldn't get that by doing this, because they themselves and NATO collectively as a whole is not going to respond to a few random drones like crashing in the woods in the same way that we would respond to like, I don't know, Russian and Belarusian forces like suddenly trying to plow across the Polish border. Like, you're not going to get the same response. That those are two drastically different things. So that kind of, takes some weight away from the idea that it was a quote unquote test. So, you know, maybe it's somewhere in the middle between the two. But in between the two, the common denominator is just stupidity. But that's been a common feature, so that's not really surprising. If for some reason, with their whole joint military exercise with Belarus that they have coming up in a few days, if that for some reason is a staging attempt to like charge into Poland out of nowhere. I mean, that might end better than people think it will because that'll get smashed real quick. And that will kind of force everybody's hand into smashing this whole thing real quick. So I also, because I do still think there are some moderately intelligent military command staff in Moscow. I don't think that's actually a thing that's going to happen, but uh, maybe it could. Maybe Putin ordered it, and it is about to happen, and they can't really stop it because he'll just have them killed if they try to, and it wouldn't be as easy to stop that as it is to, quietly not waste every single remaining cruise missile that Russia has on striking random playgrounds and kindergartens in Ukraine. So that is a thing that is ongoing. As said before, last time, we're at roughly one quarter of Russia's oil refining capacity offline because of strikes. And there were more strikes since then. More have taken place. Some as far, where was the farthest one? There was one that was like not, it wasn't Kazan, it was somewhere near there. But anyways, there are strikes, or there were strikes ongoing a few hours ago in Bryansk, and that's Smolensk. This is Bryansk. There were strikes ongoing in Bryansk and Smolensk. Targets unknown, damage unknown. We will have to wait until the morning to find out. Once some like once Russians in the local area, put up cell phone videos on TikTok, and once we get a first, spy satellite pass over the area, and the one in Smolensk was an oil facility. I don't know if it was a refinery or a pipeline like pumping station, but in the few videos that were posted when the strikes were ongoing in the nighttime, the residents who were recording them did say it's the Luke oil facility in Russian. Obviously, uh, I they didn't specify like what kind of facility it was, but it was some kind of oil and gas industry facility since those are the obvious and primary targets. All right, let me drink some water. Then we have U.S., Venezuela, and China and Taiwan, both undergoing preparation stages. Uh, why do you think SC is so much trashier than Alaska? That depends on how you mean that question. Do you mean that as in why why do I view it as trashier? That would be because it is. The infrastructure is horrible. There's garbage all over the place. Everybody is everyone is really gun happy, fantasizing and like constantly fantasizing about the day they get to shoot someone for looking suspicious while dropping off an Amazon package. If you're asking me like why do I think it's like this way? Like why is everyone constantly just throwing garbage on the side of the road? Why is the state's government like so inept and incompetent and refuses to spend any money like fixing anything and is just letting everything decay while constantly doing things like what was the previous But before Nikki Haley, it was that the previous governor, while I was still in high school, he was famous for constantly using the state's money, the state government's money, to fly down to Argentina to bang Argentinian hookers. If you're asking why I, if you're asking me, like, if I have any idea why it's like that, I have no idea what's going on in these people's heads. Like, I saw, like, just like, I have no idea what was going on that in that one, like, every redneck stereotype combined incarnate into one person dude I saw outside of my mom's doctor's office a couple of months ago, where dude dude stopped at the stop sign. I'm surprised he even stopped. But at the stop sign, before he pulled out into the road, he, tipped that Budweiser back and was chugging that beer, you know, not driving after having drank like at a bar. He was drinking while driving. Like, he was going for double bonus points. I mean, maybe it's because the idea of like cleaning stuff up, picking up trash is that probably falls under like environmentalism, and I guess that's considered woke, and that means it's evil. And in terms of like the gun happy fantasize about getting to, I don't know, shoot someone knocking at your door, and all the super drunk, like big pickup truck redneck stuff. I guess that's just because the local culture, venerates and celebrates those things. So they kind of just pervade everywhere and stay around long after they should have been ditched. Let's see. So here we go. The U.S. has been sending military force one bit after another down to the southern Caribbean and to Puerto Rico and associated islands around the general area offshore of and around Venezuela. And we already before this had sent some amount of military detachment to Guyana. And we do, not officially, but we do sort of have a bit of permanent presence in Colombia. So again, the narrative about this publicly is that this is about combating drug smuggling, which you don't send massive naval flotillas full of cruise missile launchers to do stuff like that, and you don't start stacking up portion by portion until you have an entire division, uh, you know, division of Marines and amphibious craft and smaller semi-aircraft carriers that don't have too many combat aircraft but do have a few on them, and also sending squadrons of F-35s and now Reaper drones, probably covertly unannounced some Fury drones as well. Those are stationed outside of any form of striking range Venezuela might have on Puerto Rico. And just this week, another round of Marines and amphibious stuff and combat jets were sent down to Puerto Rico. So continuing to stock this all up, as most likely, uh, best case, no conflict whatsoever scenario would just be to kind of break, like arm break Venezuela, sort of over threaten Venezuela enough to the point where either by their own choice, without us doing anything, the Venezuelan government and the Venezuelan military oust Maduro themselves and acquiesce to the terms that are being asked of them, which is basically just let the outside oil industry in to revamp and upgrade Venezuela's oil production back up to and beyond the 3 million barrels per day it once maintained and up to the 5 or 6 it's capable of maintaining, uh, or the or even we would probably even just accept Maduro himself agreeing to those terms. We don't really care. The aim of regime change people fail to understand of regarding like why the U.S. strategic apparatus is doing something when it does something. Regime change is not the goal. That's not the end like purpose of the regime change when regime change is enacted. Regime change is enacted as part of being considered necessary to achieving a different, a separate goal. If the person in charge, in this case Maduro, like acquiesced to whatever the specific terms were, the U.S., the Pentagon would leave him in power. I do guarantee you that. There's this misconstrued idea that like they actually do care about the specific person in power. We don't. We care about the end goal, which is to get the Orinoco Belt, this massive area, 3+ times the size of Gahuar in terms of volume and like underground surface area. The goal is to get this up and running at its capability as quickly as possible, which would still be a process of probably at least a decade to get that going at maximum. Only a couple of years to get Venezuela back up to 3 million barrels per day, but you close to a decade to expand everything and implement modern steam lifting, like what happens in the tar sands up in Canada, to get the Orinoco Belt up to like 5 or 6 million barrels per day. Uh, so over threatening Venezuela to the point of them acquiescing themselves with or without Maduro would be probably the more preferable goal for everybody involved. However, the assumption that both I and likely the U.S. strategic decision making apparatus have already assumed is that he's not going to go willingly, and the Venezuelan government and other military officials at large outside of his immediate circle are also going to kind of need to be convinced to turn on him. So uh, it would end up being just airstrikes and sea-launched cruise missile strikes at locations and assets of the Venezuelan military, of which there are not that many because Venezuela's military kind of doesn't really exist. They have a few planes that they can barely maintain. They have some. They have some. I think they have some T-72s, maybe in terms of like ground vehicles, but a lot of their other stuff is like really old M60 like patents or something that we gave them way back in the 60s. And other than that, it's largely a bunch of ski mask, like black bagging militia type stuff. So the like play out would be a bunch of strikes, airstrikes, cruise missile strikes on Venezuelan military assets and infrastructure, and Maduro aligned officials and Maduro specific aligned government infrastructure until it got to the point where an internal decision was made within Venezuela to get rid of him and his immediate surrounding cadre, as Venezuela is a type 2 scenario. I talked about this in the previous stream, I think. We'll just put number 2 here, or type 2, I guess, T hashtag 2, a type 2 autocracy, which is one where, unlike Kim Jong-un, unlike Saddam, and unlike Xi Jinping, essentially at this point, they're it's not one dude who's like truly the dude, and it is all him. Everything, every decision goes through him. Everything is top down. Venezuela is a case where there actually is a government. There's the different branches and stuff that, including like a parliament or a Congress or whatever, that acts on its own separately and like does stuff and runs the country. It's just that the most critical decisions get run through Big M, and also he says some stuff sometimes randomly, and if he says the stuff, then they have to do it. But a lot of the governing structure actually exists and functions apart from him, and thus kind of could, just fine on its own. Apart from needing a president that you could very easily just socket someone into that puppet slot without any trouble. And also, there's, a whole, uh, like, legitimately existing opposition party that would be ready to, like, assume control anyways. So, that is a much easier system to deal with when wanting to remove somebody and not have to do an actual occupation, like in the case of Iraq, or like what would have to be done in North Korea, for example, where you would have to do that because the whole thing would come crashing down and you would have to reconstruct an entire new thing from the ground up. This is not a case where that is necessary, but that like Marine Expeditionary Force is probably there in the event that some ground intervention like is at least temporarily necessary for like post Maduro immediate few weeks capital security. But in terms of like occupation, like actual invasion of like hundreds of thousands of personnel and reconstructing a government apparatus from the ground up, this is not a case where you would actually have to do that. That is the case when you're dealing with removing a type 1 autocracy. Venezuela is a type 2, so that's not necessary. But anyways, that's the whole setup and arrangement going on here. And coming, or it seems like it's coming at the earlier end of the time frame I expected. Those of you who've been around for a while, I've called or expected us to do Venezuela in the later 2020s, second half of the 2020s. The only thing that seems off from my initial expectation was I thought we were going to wait for them to do the invasion of Guyana, which they have been all but bragging about the fact that they're inevitably going to do. I thought we were going to wait for them to do that and then use that as the jumping reason to springboard into this. But it looks like we're going ahead of that and we're just going to forego that reasoning. Probably because, and I said this last time, we got the whole thing with China and Taiwan coming up next year or the year after, most likely, that we're going headlong into, and strategic decision making up in DC probably made the call that like let's just deal with Venezuela now and just get it done and over with, get it out of the way quickly while we can, so that there will be no assets tied down anywhere else when it comes time to jump into the Western Pacific. Let me take another drink of water. We're heading over here for the latest indicator, and one of the big indicators, actually, kind of more so than any of the military drills previously observed. Blah, blah, blah. Power of Siberia 2. That is the intended additional natural gas pipeline between Russia and China. It would take an estimated 5 years to build if construction actually starts on it, which it still hasn't. They've agreed to it, to the terms now. Just Russia doesn't like the terms anymore because now that Russia is, you know, so weak compared to what it was once perceived as being, do a sad face there. Uh, and Xi Jinping over in China is doing the Somali pirate meme of "I'm the captain now." China has forced Russia's hand into agreeing to the terms of the pipeline will be built, but it will be built predominantly by Chinese companies, and it will be Chinese owned as opposed to like a 50-50 split between China and Russia. And Russia, doesn't like that arrangement, but they don't really have a choice in the matter because they're not in a position to set the terms anymore. And they kind of just need the money no matter what, and no matter what the discount is at. So they agreed to it because they don't really have a choice anymore. Now, over here, we have this whole situation coming up. So, we all know this is coming, and military prep on both sides has been observed. Namely, if you guys remember, the original schedule was in the later 2020s. We were going to start handing stuff over to Taiwan, like Abrams tanks, the most modern batch of F-16s. They're probably called the F-16X or something because that's, I don't know, we're in that phase now where we just put X after everything. It sounded dumb in Digimon and Yu-Gi-Oh! 20 years ago. It sounds just as stupid now. Okay, we need to stop. So they that was the original plan. However, we started handing them stuff way earlier. At the end of 2022, we already started handing them HIMARS to lob at the amphibious vessels as they're crossing the strait. We started handing them additional Avenger air defense systems and the SAMS air defense systems, along with, I forgot which type of anti-ship stuff, but we started handing them land-based anti-ship missile launchers as well. We started doing that a year after that. And in early 2024, the first Abrams tanks were already sighted in Taiwan. And then uh, near the end of last year, they were originally scheduled for, I think, 2029, the most modern F-16 handovers, but then we bumped them down to 2027. However, even after bumping it down to 2027, the first batch of them, the first dozen or so, already showed up at the end of last year. So we've been hush rushing everything over there to them. They've been doing a bunch of prep work themselves, uh, concealing concealing ground-based air defense and anti-ship missile launching systems inside of generic white vans, white lorries, of which there are hundreds of thousands of on the island. And the Taiwanese military has begun strategically just parking white vans and stuff just all over the place, to the point that there are at minimum thousands of them scattered around. So, if when the time comes, China wants to like take out those concealed air defense and anti-ship launching systems, they're going to have to hit all of those, random white vans and lorries, mini, freight trucks. They're just parked all over the place. So that's kind of the purpose behind that. That whole ploy is to draw out and soak up a lot of their precision munitions, as they will, obviously try to take those out from a distance before they start actually coming in. And over the past few years, we have observed China building rapidly additional military amphibious transit vehicles to carry as much as they can. And we have watched them also welding and bolting anti-air systems to the roofs of large civilian vehicle ferries, because we've already seen that they're going to have to try to use some of those. And we've seen recently down on their southern coast them practicing with that big sort of hodgepodge dismounting amphibious landing ramp setup system that they designed to like use when parking a few of those big ferries next to each other. There's like this combined super rapid amphibious offloading ramp that all their I don't know, BTRs or whatever and double Z tanks. Their tanks are usually called like ZZ-99 or something. Will come off and race off the ramp onto, assuming anything makes it to the shore. And we've watched them do large amphibious landing exercises along with uh, constantly doing larger and larger sortie flybys, up to, close to 200 aircraft in a single day at times, and observed them as well on 3 years out of the past four doing large practice runs of rapid transport, rapid force assembly on the coastal cities of Fujian. When those videos got posted out from Chinese citizens up on TikTok, before usually within 24 hours they were scrubbed. The I think China's intelligence agency is called like Wumao or something. I think I'm not sure that's the term I've heard most frequently. They don't do initials. If you want to initial them like the FSB or the CIA, then I guess you could just say the WM or something. The WM works fast, but not fast enough because each time they've done that, people in China have gotten videos of that process out before they were scrubbed. And so those were practice runs, practicing the rapid delivery and assembly of force, vehicles, and personnel in Fujian as fast as they could, to see how fast they could do it, get an idea of the time frame they're working with, and work out any flaws in the assembly process. Now that we're approaching the most likely time frame, we're past the point where it would be this fall because they would have had to have started the force assembly by now, which they have not done. So we're probably past that tipping point where now the earliest would be next fall, unless again they suddenly get stupid and decide to do it some other time of the year. But that would be dumb because during fall is when the waters in the Taiwan Strait are the calmest. So it would only be a 6 hour sailing across from Fujian to Taiwan, as opposed to other times of the year, it would be like 10 to 12 hours to cross the strait. But, I can't predict everybody's like strategic idiocy. So they might do something random and attack in spring for all I know. But the most recent development that I did the most recent video on is that they have suddenly started over importing on crude oil shipments. So if you're wondering, with OPEC doing the sudden supply surge, where most of that has actually ended up going, especially as demand has curtailed back in other places for various reasons, and as production has surged up in other locales like Brazil really rapidly. Most of that is going, most of that has been going to China because they've been overbuying for the last few months. They started around, I guess, late spring or early summer, and they've already brought in an extra few 100 million barrels of oil as they are stockpiling in, inventories, crude oil storage inventories ahead of starting this whole thing because they know that once this begins, not just the Taiwan Strait, but like the whole immediate area around it is going to be a no-go for any ocean-going vessels. The shipping industry itself will just refuse to sail anywhere around the area. So that's going to basically mean that probably only China's northernmost ports are going to be bringing in tanker shipments along with their 2 million barrel per day, or no, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 million barrels per day via pipeline from Russia and like 500,000 from Kazakhstan. So they know they're going to get cut off to a decent extent for a decent period in terms of how much they can import. So they are now mass overbuying so that they can stock up ahead of time. And a number of other products, apparently, on which they are heavily import dependent, they have been recently over ordering ahead of time. So, you know, that's kind of for anyone who's really still doubting it, if you want yet another nail in the coffin of, I'm sorry, guys, but this is happening, you can America bad all you want, but China also bad. China also do big invasion. This is coming. You can't escape this reality. I'm sorry. Everybody is invading and or attacking everybody. So that's the latest development with that. And I don't think I had anything else. Nothing in particular, at least. There were no major recent oil and gas developments over the last week, other than Brazil reached and exceeded 4 million barrels per day, but we already mentioned that in the past stream. So wait, lag, wait, wait, wait for the lag, wait for the lag, wait for the lag, wait for the lag. The lag's over. Okay. So there's nothing really else going on at the moment. Let me chug some water. Ugh. Uh, India's economic future with, I mean, uh, Trump didn't really, uh, the tariffs are dumb to begin with on everybody, because yes, that does get passed to consumers, despite him doing that weird like 50 IQ speech or speech that requires 50 IQ to actually believe something like that about how the terrorists will be paid by the governments of the countries that they're applied to. Uh, no, they're being paid by the companies that are importing the products from those companies, and those companies then pass the price down onto the consumers. Like down here, for example, where I'm stranded in South Carolina, a lot of the aluminum that gets used for aluminum foil, like for food stuff, comes from Canada, and it's not one of the things that's on the exemption list. So the tariffs did get applied to it. And because the company isn't just giving you the plus 30% price or whatever, they're giving you whatever price increase they feel like to keep their profit margin. It went from $7 a roll up to $9 a roll, as like one random example. Also, the German chocolate I like, Rittersport, went from $3.50 uh, to $4.80. That's almost $5 a bar. Thank you. Wonderful decision, people. It's awesome. Thank you. It's not like I already had an income issue and kind of couldn't get as much as I would otherwise like to, but now you're strangling me even more with this. 350 from 350 now up to basically $5 a bar. Thanks. That's awesome. Amazing. Wonderful economic decisions. Uh, in terms of like effect on India, I don't No, I mean, I can't give you specifics. He only applied a 25% one to India, of which, like with each other set, a lot of things are exempt from that. But I mean, even at a 25% markup, a lot of stuff that US companies import from India is, still a lot cheaper than it would be to get from a number of other places or to make in the US. So they're not going to stop importing the stuff. Like make it to make it more expensive to import from India, for example, than to make insert whatever particular random cheap product you're talking about into the sentence here. You'd have to it would have to be like I don't know 500% tariff to actually make it reach like cost parity. So also the whole notion of like this is going to make this is such a genius move. It's going to make everybody move everything back to the US is also a delusional lie because, like, again, to actually cause that much of a cost discrepancy to even out, you would have to apply like a 500% tariff. And not even Trump is stupid enough to do that because that would immediately cause every American to not be able to afford to live. So, and that would result in riots, which would result in uh, resignation from office, to say the least. So, not even he's dumb enough to actually do that. So, the whole tariff thing isn't even actually aimed at legitimately bringing things back to America. It's aimed at riling up and continuing to get his voter base to continue idolatrously worshiping him while still claiming that they're Christians and that they worship God and that they follow Christ, uh, despite 90% of the time being devoted to Trump in most cases. So that's the real reason, since he ran on external blame, basically, your life's getting worse, and it's because of the Mexicans. It's because of people, who treated you the best, especially like on 9/11. Canadians are like the Canadians literally freely like took hundreds of thousands of stranded American air passengers into their homes on 9/11. As just one random example, and were the first to jump in, no matter what Afghanistan ended up turning into in the 20 years afterwards, were like the first to jump in with us. So, people who were legitimately and even now still are your friends, and you would have considered your friend up to 5 seconds ago when Trump said, actually, they're evil and they exist only to screw over America. So now Uh, the internet is full of chud comments about how we should just invade Canada and Canadians should just be exterminated. So, fascinating mentality to deal with, but it's running on a everyone else is to blame. Someone did this to you. It's not because of the fact that the world is inherently disjunctioned and chaotic and is comprised of literally 8+ billion decisions made by 8+ billion people, all compounding upon and interacting with, and adjusting the outcomes of each other in ways that are so complex, not even like the biggest quantum computing AI algorithm models that tech bros jerk off to could possibly analyze all of it. It's because the idea of grasping something like that is too far beyond most human brains. So usually, and this isn't just a Trump and US thing, this is a every politician everywhere thing. It's just that the scapegoat differs between countries and, between generations and over time. The idea of actually trying to grasp the reality of the world, which is that you have no real control and you can't really uh, jerk the reins on the horse in the way that you think you can. Dealing with that reality is too psychologically damaging for the majority of humanity. So it's a lot easier to pull people the way you want them by basically picking some boogeyman. In this case, yeah, at first in Trump's first term, it was primarily just like the immigrants. Now it's turned into the entire rest of the world outside of America. It's a lot easier to just like pick a boogeyman group and say it's them. The ever ominous they. They did this to you. They took this away from you. Uh, no one, no, there is no they. There is a confluence or a congregance of billions upon billions of decisions and economic interactions that have added up in a way that is not beneficial to specific groups of people. And now, uh, Americans, this time being one of those groups of people, are upset about it. But that's the end result of things and underlying factors that you know are not changeable no matter who makes what decision, such as the fact that the net energy yield that we have to work with from the energy we're extracting and utilizing from the environment around us, whether fossil hydrocarbons or whether nuclear, hydro, wind, solar, is continuing to head down. And we hit a bit of a pit until recently when now that a whole bunch of more conventional, although a lot of it is offshore, petroleum stuff is being added back in place of shale. That dip is being fought back against, but we're still on this downward curve in terms of like the net yield compared to the amount of economic value and industrial effort that has to be solely dedicated to obtaining energy that can then be used in the first place. We're on a downward curve. There is nothing that can reverse that. That is just inherent energy dynamics. However, there is, contrary to the doomer thing, there is a floor. There is a basement that we will not drop past unless we intentionally kill ourselves. There is a curve out that we would reach. There is a floor which coal, nuclear, and geothermal would not let us fall below. But that floor is, it is not. It's well below the big high of the 90s and early 2000s that we really, or sorry, technically the energy high was during the 50s and 60s globally. The economic high or the quality of life high was during the 90s and early 2000s because because of the progress of technology, which continued to improve things even as the energy yield ratio was decreasing. The continued expansion of access and use of specific new technologies over the later 20th century, which were actually ones that were beneficial, that did change our lives for the better. Unlike AI and unlike crypto and unlike Elon's direct connection to the internet brain chip, that after complaining so much about things like that for so many years, now all of a sudden he's all for it. That's kind of kind of creepy. Unlike a lot of these things, most of the stuff we added on was like actual life-changing stuff, and that kept the actual quality of life aspect going upwards even as the energy yield started going down until we hit the early 2000s when the yield was going down and global oil production was plateauing, hitting the first global oil peak, and the prices started going up. Then we started hitting the downward quality of life economic trend, and we did have that brief period in the 2010s where even in the back of your minds, I've phrased it this way before, even in the back of your mind, you knew it was over, but it was still so close enough uh, to the way it was so recently that for the 2010s, we at least were able to pretend it wasn't over. Now we're completely outside of the bubble. There is no state of being we can get to that will resemble pretending that it's not over. Ugh. Will India invade the borderland with China for their water supply? Invade? No. India is facing, in about a decade and a half, is when it's going to start hitting hard. India is facing, we'll do the stereotypical circle with water waves in it. India is facing depletion of its groundwater aquifers, which uh, supply the extracting unrenewed groundwater is responsible for about 20% of the water supply to India's agriculture. So, losing that would cause India's food production capability to crash by 20%, which would mean they would drop from a 1.5 billion person feeding capability, which is how, although marginally at this point, they're still a food exporter, that would cause them to drop down to about only 1.2 billion, which would mean, on a rapid pace, 300 million people's worth of excess food imports would have to appear out of nowhere on the global market, which ain't gonna happen at the pace that it would need to. So India is faced basically with two options. As China has been constructing dams and diversion infrastructure along the Brahmaputra River in their portion of it to divert flow from that river along a either aqueduct or pipeline system to the northern and middle reaches of China, which are having their own aquifer depletion issues already. And China is already in a net food importer position by about like 15%. So India could bomb those dams, that infrastructure, which would restore the full flow coming out of the Himalayas to the Brahmaputra and conduct diversion infrastructure of their own to divert water from that river over into the Indian heartland where, most of the population and the agriculture is. Or they could go with the option that it looks like they are going with, which is to construct, because they've already started these, construct a number of dams and diversion or aqueduct infrastructure to divert most of the water from the Indus River away from flowing down through Pakistan and divert it down through aqueduct channels or pipelines into India to be used to eventually supplement their aquifer depletion. And this obviously is not going to fly with Pakistan and would, or rather just straight up will, result in actual war between the two, would be either the fourth or fifth war. But this one wouldn't be like the last ones because it wouldn't be a like border dispute thing that turned into a war that ended up kind of going nowhere, with the exception with the exception of one of the four, which was the one where Bangladesh broke off from Pakistan. This one, Pakistan could not back out of no matter what because that's their water. So this one would go full on or will go full on whenever they decide to go for it. They had their little test run sort of already earlier this year after that terror attack. India used that as pretext to bomb some military sites in northern Pakistan, and then they started airstrike exchanges with each other. And this was it kind of ended up basically as a bit of a combat test on both of their ends. Pakistan wasn't expecting it to happen, but it happened, so it also served as a combat test for them as well. So it let them both in this case see, but in India's case primarily since they're the one doing the planning because they know they kind of have to do this. Since the other option would be fight with China, and Pakistan's obviously a much weaker opponent than China is, so they've pretty clearly chosen Pakistan out of the two options. And India did move additional ground forces up to the north during those ongoing clashes earlier this year, which they are, from all observations, keeping there thus far. So seems like they're going to do a gradual bit by bit accumulation builds up over the years. But that was a sort of aerial engagement and cross-border strike capability test that the both of them effectively got against each other. So, in terms of will they go against China over the water? No, they seem to have made it pretty clear that they're going to take the Pakistan option. Because again, even a post Taiwan, uh, many losses suffered weakened China, China would still be a much more powerful opponent than Pakistan would. So they're choosing Pakistan no matter what. All right. Uh, ooh, thank you. Cash money. USD, actually. Uh, and but why e-bikes? The issue with electric vehicles is more so like it would be better to just use high mileage hybrids and to just use really like high MPG hybrids, and and also that would like legitimately be the better option, and also do this thing that even we back up home, as I've mentioned this, despite being part of the U.S., back up home in Alaska, we have this thing called public transit. Uh, it was free for most of us. And in Fairbanks in particular, our system was well designed. The bus routes were well laid out, so that there was uh, effectively you could catch one every 30 minutes. And the longest delay on some of the less used routes would at most be an hour and a half. And basically, there was nowhere that you would ever really need to get to that you could not get to on the bus. But I know this is in large part specifically a US issue, but a fair bit, Canada, you guys kind of share in this too. Uh, the, the, the mass public transit, especially free public transit, is kind of a big, fuel overuse issue nullifier. As remember, the world is consuming 100 million barrels per day of oil, but 20 million out of that is just the US. Where's the rectifier? There it is. In terms of the actual like green energy math stuff, I will try to run through that again because it has been a few years. So I have to factor in a bunch of different stuff as well. And also, what was the paid question? Few yes. I'm sorry to anyone who's still clinging to it. Fusion power is effectively fictional. I mean, it's real. It exists. Like we can do it. We have done it. We I think like the record was set at a facility in the UK for like for running a thing for like 130 seconds or whatever. Not holding an actual fusion reaction for that long because the heat from that would have actually melted the facility. In reality, the fusion reactions are like flashes that happen for like a thousandth of a second. But in terms of like how long they were able to like keep an energy flow out of it or something, it was like 130 seconds. The issue is, that that's kind of worthless, especially when like and for all the big hype it's getting, like the newest idea for this actual power generation version of a fusion facility that they want to test in France is like this one in particular. They're like it'll be done in 2043, and we think it'll be able to generate as much as 500 megawatts of net output energy for a few hours at a time off of a couple fusion flashes and the residual heat after that, the residual 10,000-degree heat. And then after that, you know, we're we're going to have to, after doing that every few days, for a few hours. We have to shut down for a few days because we have to flush the system with liquid helium, and we have to like check all of this like hyper delicate nanoscale precision machinery. Like when you're doing when you have to add all of this tech bro jerking it, uh, like essay posting stuff in footnotes, like see footnote for clarity. When you have to add all of these additional caveats to it, that's your signal that it's not going to work. Like it'll work as in it will exist, but it ain't going to be our power structure basis. 'Cause, and in terms of the output, even if it did work, even if it was constant, if it was magical, if this hypothetical facility came into existence in on schedule, which they never are, in 2043, and produced 500 megawatts constantly after costing, we'll use, I guess, I tier as a base example. What's I tier up to now? Something like 45 billion euros thrown into it. And we're already up to the point where it's not even going to be finished until like 2033 or something like that, after it was supposed to be done in like 2022 initially. So even if this did happen and this 2043 one came online and it produced 500 megawatts, so what? 500 megawatts is nothing. That's like one aluminum smelter. That's like one tiny city. That's like not back up home in Fairbanks, but Anchorage. That's like Anchorage's power consumption. And Anchorage only has like 250, 270,000 people. The global total right now for electricity demand is close to 3.5 terawatts. Okay, 500 megawatts is half of 1 gigawatt, and 1 terawatt is 1,000 gigawatts. The average electricity demand load across all grids on Earth combined at any given time averages about 3.5 terawatts in present day. And it's still going up by about 3% a year. And, that's just the average. It fluctuates based on different times of year and different times of day versus night, like which portions of the Earth, based on, population concentration, are in and by, density of energy usage, uh, which, portions are in daytime versus which portions are at night. And currently, at the high point, uh, as of the most recent data over last year, the high point during the day would average between 5 and 6 terawatts, with the low point going down to like 2.7 at night, or when the most power hungry regions of the world were in the nighttime side of the Earth's rotation. So this is worthless. This is meaningless. We're pursuing this effectively just for science, which I'm not opposed to. Like I do want that to continue, but I don't want it to keep being sold as like our energy future. We have nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion works just fine. Stop the fear mongering. You don't have incidents unless you go out of your way to try to cause them. Uh, like Chernobyl, when you actually read on it, like, damn, the Soviet, uh, and these, no, sorry, not the engineers. The engineers are actually they're at fault too because they listened to the orders they were given. Oh, so never mind. The entire structure went out of its way to try to cause that to happen. That is like you were dealing with negative IQ decision making. And in terms of like the waste, we can get rid of it. Like we know how to do that. It's not that difficult. It's more expensive. Getting rid of it is more expensive than just storing it deep underground, like 5 kilometers under bedrock in Finland. But we can make these things. They're called breeder slash burner reactors. They're a special type of reaction that's less energy output efficient. It's like for the same amount of material you put into it, it's only going to generate like three-quarters as much energy, which, given that nuclear reactors typically output in like multiple gigawatts, that's still a huge amount of energy. Like anywhere from modern ones are usually anywhere from 1 gigawatt up to like the one in Finland's their newest power plant is like 2.5 gigawatts per reactor. Like each individual reactor is like cranking out 2.5 gigawatts. Uh, so the burner reactors, they only produce about three-quarters as much power as a regular one, but that's because that extra quarter of power is being locked into an internal degradation process that is breaking down the nuclear waste from a spent uranium that would remain lethally radioactive for like 10,000 years down to versions of lead and I believe xenon gas, but I'm not positive. Lead and like xenon gas, versions of them that are only harmfully radioactive for one of them is like 120 years, and one of them is 80 years, which is literally a few years less than most modern nations' human life expectancies. So we can actually get rid of the nuclear waste, like literally get rid of it. We just choose not to because we don't effectively, we're just choosing to not do it because we don't want to spend the money, because it's cheaper to just shove it under a mountain in Nevada or have Finland drill, giant holes all the way down to hell or whatever and toss it down the shaft. But we can do this. So like we also could generate a huge amount of power from the act of getting rid of the nuclear waste we have because we can do this process that quite literally negates its existence. I mean, a form of it will still exist as lead and xenon that will be radioactive, but again, only for on average like 100 years, and then it's fine. As opposed to like 10 or 20,000 years for the regular waste that we just like throw under a mountain because we don't want to pay the money to build burner reactors to actually get rid of it. Now, in the past, decades ago, we had the excuse of like burner reactors are still like being researched and we're not really sure how to work with them yet. But we kind of finalized that in like the 90s and early 2000s. So now there's no real excuse for it anymore. And some countries are actually doing this. India is now, I'm just drawing random X's. I don't know where they are. It was just one at first. India is now uh, has a second one under construction. India is actually building two burner reactors and is going to get rid of their nuclear waste from their regular power plants in those burner reactors. So, uh, random, like completely random W for India, but India W. So they're one of the few countries making like intelligent energy decisions. And also, there's the whole fact I've talked about before plenty of times that there is effectively an infinite amount of uranium dissolved in the Earth's seawater that's naturally occurring there. It is at such a concentration to where it can be chemically extracted by basically it would be in shallow sea areas where there's a flowing current, like just offshore of the southeastern U.S., for example. You would put this thing on the floor, like the weight that sits on the seafloor that buoys are usually attached to. You have the surface of the sea up here, and you have the buoy or whatever, and it has the flashy, blinky lights to signal ships. It would be something like that, except instead of that, it would have these things that look like basically giant pipe cleaners or fuzzy tentacles that have this antimony compound that extracts the uranium dissolved in the seawater. Slowly, it accumulates on the giant tendril things, and then these would get reeled up onto a the back of like a big spool ship that would go out there and reel them up and bring those ones in to a port somewhere. The uranium would be extracted, sent to a facility, turned into yellow cake, then turned into fuel rods, and new freshly cleaned tethers would be reinstalled to start extracting more uranium out of the seawater. And it wouldn't even be that expensive. It would be around like 270. It would have been closer down to around 250 now, but 270 because of inflation. We're talking in 2025 dollars. It would be around $270 per pound of uranium. And the highest uranium ever got was $140 a pound. Currently, it's around like 80. But this is effectively meaningless because the price of uranium is less than a percent of the cost of like running a nuclear plant. It's effectively is not a cost factor whatsoever. So the and to we let's see to run all of the current world's nuclear reactors on seawater extracted uranium, if we extracted that much uranium annually from the seawater just to run the ones that currently exist, it would take roughly 10 to 12,000 years of extracting uranium from the seawater at that rate to actually start to see the concentration start going down, before we would start, actually getting less out of the extraction. And then also, there's the geothermal thing. Geothermal is everywhere. It's not just in California and Indonesia. It's not just in places where the heat's close to the surface. That's where it's cheap, in places like Indonesia and California, because you can go down like only half a mile and you have rocks that are like 600 degrees Fahrenheit. But the Earth has a temperature gradient. It gets hotter the further down you go. And if you go down in most locations, even far away from any plate boundaries or hotspots, if you just go down like 5, sometimes only 4 miles, you'll still get rocks that are around 300 or 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is more than enough to flash boil water that you pipe down there. And some of this has been tested. Like they have done, they did construct a small output plant in, I think, Saskatchewan, in the random middle of nowhere, that's just using generic temperature gradient heat at about like 4 miles down or something like that. But there's also just random upwellings within the mantle that cause really, really large hotspots, like the one in Nebraska, Kansas, and this general area, where in this area, you only have to go down about 2 or 3 miles and you'll find rocks that are 400 degrees. And drilling that deep isn't an issue. Like for oil and stuff, we drill as deep as 6 miles all the time. It's not, this doesn't require some fancy advanced technology. We just don't do it because, in terms of green energy, we have like cult mentality locked on to solar panels for some reason, which is the worst possible option because solar output, people already have a misconstrued idea of it. They think you know, you have 12 hours of night at which it doesn't work, and then 12 hours of daytime in which it, just turns on and it outputs a set power level. That's not even how it works. Solar power looks like this. You have a sunrise here. It starts coming up like this, and then once the sun is close to directly overhead, it shoots up, and for like 3, maybe 4 hours, it has a high output level close to what its labeled capacity is. And then as you hit the later afternoon, it drops off a cliff until sunset and it ceases to exist. So this is like you're not even only getting the advertised solar power generation capacity for 12 hours a day, you're actually only getting it for 4 hours a day, which is even worse because that then expands the whole delusion of relying on, bunkers full of giant batteries, which is, I really don't understand how anyone thinks this is going to work, but oh well. All right, I'm not going to go any further on that, just because I'm already running way over time. Let me look over here. Blah blah blah. Uh, yes, the U.S. has, we've made it quite blatantly clear multiple times, that we are we are going to get directly involved with this. Uh, for for one reason, because we can't really take the 5% risk that the invasion actually succeeds, and also because from a strategic perspective, there are two instances from a strategic perspective. One, this will be the one and only real excuse we get to take out as much of the Chinese military as possible to cause their strategic presence as much damage as we possibly can in one go. And yes, we are going to suffer a fair amount of losses on our end for this. That is already expected. Uh, we we've overestimated what we will likely see because post Vietnam, we switched over to a policy that people don't like hearing because it implies things about how much weight their vote has on the direction the U.S. takes. Post Vietnam, over the 80s, we switched over to a policy of U.S. strategic military decisions being made by the military and associated decision makers, as opposed to by the president, Congress, and the will of the general public. Regardless of public intention, we are doing this, and just like the with both Iraq's with Gulf War One and with the invasion of Iraq in '03, we gave a lot of credence to Iraq. We vastly overestimated how many losses, both in vehicles and personnel, we assumed we were going to take. We put the losses at like uh, we were expecting to lose 20,000 guys, and as much as I think we assumed we would lose like maybe 200 aircraft and hundreds of tanks and a few naval vessels, and we ended up losing like less than 200 guys. We lost a few aircraft and like 7 Abrams, 5 of which were Abrams that we destroyed ourselves because they got disabled and we didn't want to just leave them lying around in the desert. But in this case, this is a place where we actually are going to see like significant casualties. Uh, but on like the military's end, they have still given a most likely overestimation uh, out of, just caution of being ready to expect it. So their preparation or expectation of what we are prepared and willing to lose in order to carry this out, to effectively knock China off the threat map. We are prepared to sacrifice uh, up to 2 carrier strike groups. That's 2 super carriers, uh, plus the plus the up to 20 or so destroyers and couple of missile cruisers that would be accompanying them. And I think they said we're prepared to lose, or we're willing to accept the loss of up to 300 to 400 combat jets. And supposedly also one uh, we're willing to, or we plan to, or intend to, once it looks like it's happening, like rapidly drop off the. I don't know which one is stationed in 3 separate groups across Japan, but they would be brought together and rapidly deposited on Taiwan. I don't know which division it is of the Marines, the a third division, fourth division. I think there's 4. There might be 5. But we are willing to effectively be willing to lose a full division. Granted, we don't expect that they're literally all going to die, but they're probably going to see some decent loss levels. We have a threshold that's they've set that we are willing to lose or expend in exchange for dealing effectively a knockout blow for any future ambitions of China. Now, the likely losses to be seen will probably not actually reach that level, but that's like the sort of threshold of what the Pentagon is preparing to be willing to take in order for enacting this. What was the other? Okay, that's the one I did address. Got all that. Blah blah blah. Fails the invasion. Uh, okay, yeah. For the if things get better for the U.S., that depends on who you're asking. From a strategic point of view, yes, because this is uh, Russia has proven that China is the only real legitimate military, the closest country to being a military pure threat. But even then, they're still not actually at U.S. tier level. If they kept building themselves and did not have a collapsing population that's going to rapidly nosedive even worse, they would eventually reach U.S. level. But partly because they know they can't continue on that trajectory because of the internal, especially demographic issues. That's part of why they're going for this now. But you know, whoa, Google Earth, what was that? Russia has exposed itself and is willingly continuing to self-suicide in Ukraine. We've It's been clearly demonstrated to us that we don't really need to do anything in this regard. We can just keep giving Ukraine what they ask for and giving them as we have, as for Trump to use as his excuse of how he's still helping Ukraine while also appeasing his base voters by saying he's not actually giving Ukraine anything, just straight up giving them modern cruise missile technology and industrial machinery to build the factories that they have now built to just make effectively what are our cruise missiles themselves. Uh, they have aesthetic differences on the outside and they call them different things, but we effectively have just, said like, all right, this is, you know, cutting edge stuff to the most of the world. For us, it is like 30 plus year old stuff from the 90s. But here's the schematics. Here's what's in this type of missile. Here's what's in this type of air to ground attack munition. Here's the machinery. Go ahead and start cranking it out. It's all yours. Have fun. So the Russia situation is going to take care of itself. Letting Israel just run around rampant doing whatever is degrading groups that were not viewed favorably by the Pentagon, and Iran will probably be dealt with relatively easily. The little test run we had in June with Israel uh, kind of proved that Iran's just not going to be an issue to get rid of. So uh, that's Iran. All the Middle Eastern groups are being soaked up by Israel. Uh, Russia's taking care of itself, and we're going to use this to deal with China directly, and that's gonna clear the board. That's gonna leave the only real, like, somewhat threatening anti-U.S. country left will be North Korea, and they've always been unpredictable. So whatever, and the only other country that will militarily and economically start coming close to the U.S. in any way is India, and they just don't have they don't have big global power grabbing ambitions in the same way that China did slash still does, even though they're about to lose their hold on them. They India is aware of, based on the actions that they've started taking, they are aware that they have so many internal problems that they need to get down on immediately, that they just don't have any focus or desire for like competing on a like global influence stage. So with those, with all this other stuff in the process of dealing with itself, that means China is the only real thing. And so dealing this blow to China through this, once this starts, that just effectively clears the board, with the exception of North Korea. But, with the board cleared, North Korea ceases to really actually matter that much, because we can just gank squab them anytime we want at that point. And also, uh, sorry for what I said was, for one thing out of two things took so long. The 4-2 that I mentioned is that every now and then, we did the Gulf War blitzkrieg, but that was over a generation ago. Every now and then, especially when people are starting to question your position at the top, if you're in a position at the top like the US is, every now and then you have to do something. You have to flex. Or not just flex, you have to actually walk up to the random group of associates outside the window and like just massively crack someone's nose or like crater somebody's skull in. You have to do that every now and then from a strategic like chessboard uh, point of view, uh, to reinforce the do not question the line issue. The Gulf War, the Gulf War blitzkrieg, complete steamroll, that worked for a while. Now we started, especially as China grew more powerful over the 2010s, we started entering into a questioning period. So this is also going to serve the double function of the necessary once per generation effects. Sorry, wait for the lag, wait for the lag, wait for the lag, wait for the lag. Hello? There we go. So, like I said, this is going to serve the secondary purpose of filling the void of a once per generation necessary megaflex. Economically, to address the other part of your question, and I am ending the stream after this. Economically, there, no, it's not going to at least immediately get better, because this will cause a price surge of quite a lot of things. Most namely a lot of cheap stuff that comes out of China, but also less cheap stuff that comes out of China. Uh, it's not going to cut off like exports from China. Again, all the waters down here will shut down, but only for a few weeks while this is taking place, because that's as long as it's going to last. And that's if it goes well on China's part. This is not a porous land border that you can just keep slow IV dripping supplies across with Scooby-Doo vans, like with Ukraine and Russia. This is 100-mile wide body of water being crossed for a amphibious naval invasion, something that's already like impossibly difficult in the first place. So this won't last that long to begin with. But also, China's not going to stop exporting stuff because it wants money. It's not going to stop exporting stuff while it's going on. but a lot of stuff's going to get bottlenecked while it's going on because, again, it's going to have to divert things up to its northern ports and have to export solely from its northern ports or send stuff south by train into Vietnam to be exported by Vietnam. And uh, afterwards, uh, yeah, there's going to be like internal repercussions within China that's going to probably continue a lot of disruptions. But as I've spoken on over the past few years since I started doing this, a lot of stuff has been moving out of China in terms of manufacturing. At least important things have, or enough important things have moved out of China. There is still a lot of stuff in China, but enough has vacated China and moved elsewhere to where it will not be some massive global hindrance. But there are a number of items that like will effectively disappear from shelves for a while, like a lot of plastic knickknacks or like toys, for example. The toy aisle at every store is going to be empty for probably months. But even afterwards, yes, higher prices for things will linger around because that's just going to be the way it is in the whole internal reconstruction that's going to go on after that. Uh, Longer term, after things settle down, uh, especially because of China's reduced oil demands, I mean, things might be a little bit better. But remember, the downward slope in like economy and overall general average quality of life, like we around the world, or at least those of us who started from the highest end of it, uh, we're going to continue going down regardless. Even if the China Taiwan thing wasn't going to happen at all, we would still be going down the slope no matter what. It's just that these various global events just cause the downward slope to, look more like this and like do like random erratic things instead of being like a nice linear line down. All right. No matter what else is there, this is going to be the end of the stream here. Yeah, or just in response to that there, I effectively, and I've included this now in my my book, my story that I'm somewhat mostly done with chapter 4 of now, takes place in 2059/2060. I have I've kind of abandoned all doubt at this point that retroactively, like after everything is done, the 2020s are probably going to be historically labeled as World War III, even though it's nothing remotely close to what either of the other two were. This has kind of just been a very disorganized mess of disconnected, isolated, uh, attempted, invasions and power grabs. But, because it kind of is a dying gasp of a global power struggle, it's probably going to be retroactively called World War III, even though it's just not. But we've been desperate to call anything World War III. We've been desperate to call anything World War III for so long, just because we spent like what 3, 4 generations through the Cold War and even after the Cold War expecting there to be a World War III. But we were literally expecting like globe continent spanning front lines like World War II style, just with modern weapons and modern equipment. But it's turned out that's just not going to happen. All right. Thank you for everybody who showed up. Thank you, JB101, for the $5. That is where we are stopping.